Hello and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett. Have you ever thought about connecting the dots? That's kind of what I want to talk about today. Steve Jobs is actually, famous for a whole lot of things, but one of them is a comment that he made at one point in time about you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect the dots looking backward. So connecting the dots is one thing, but where I am today looking forward, I can actually begin the process of aligning some things that actually facilitate a connecting of dots so that when I look backward, I kind of go, oh, that's kind of an interesting way that I actually assembled that. My guest today, Philippe Bouissou, I won't go into his CV with any granular detail. It's pretty extensive and it is incredibly impressive. He's a graduate of I think one of the most prestigious business schools in the world out of Paris, the Normale Supérieure. The got a BS in mathematics, an MS in physics, a Ph.D. in nonlinear physics and chaos theory. So that right there is going to, kind of make you pause in just a moment because you're going to want to listen to what he has to say about connecting anything. But the second thing is he worked with Steve Jobs very closely. He founded and ran Apple's e-commerce business division and ran its revenue from $0 to $350 million in a year. And then it eventually grew into a $55 billion part of the business. Philippe has been around. He's a venture capitalist. He's served on boards, I think 23 boards, if I'm not mistaken. He's led over 200 management consulting projects. Yeah, I could go on and on and on. His TED Talk has got over 1 million. Well, yeah, that's a one with a whole bunch of zeros after it. 1 million views. What we're going to be talking about today is a lot of stuff that you will find in his newest book called Aligning the Dots, the new paradigm to grow any business. And I'm going to, for those of you that are watching, as well as listening, this is what the book looks like. So you're going to want to pick this book up. We're going to be talking about it. But with that rambling introduction, I want to just welcome Philippe to the show. Philippe, welcome.
Well, thank you, Blaine. It's a pleasure being on your show, and I look forward to a great discussion. Thank you again for having me as a guest.
I've been looking forward to this ever since you and I met on our office hours show a couple of weeks ago, about a week ago, I guess it was. And one of the things that I was most impressed by was not necessarily on the show, although that was impressive, but it was how quickly you said yes to the invitation to come on this show. And what that tells me is that you're a fast mover. There's not a lot, lot that grows under your feet here. The entrepreneurial ethos and the entrepreneurial profile is of somebody that actually takes action. And they take action, oftentimes through intuition, but not just through intuition. And one of the things that when I started looking at the book and started just kind of unbundling some of the things that were embedded in the book, you have a way of positioning that says revenue growth is not predicated just on intuition and execution. There's some other things that come into play. So I want to talk about that a little bit. But before we get into that nitty gritty, just the nature of the soul of business. You were part of building what became the first $1 trillion company, and you played an integral part in that process. The soul of business. And so, when I say the soul of business, what does that bring up for you?
Well, to me, it's, based on the why and the mission. And it's like, why do I go to work, and why do I do that particular task, and why do I want to work with those people? So the DNA of the company has to be ingrained by its mission, and that operation defines the soul of the business. And many businesses don't know why they exist. And in fact, when I meet an entrepreneur and I need to decide whether I want to invest in the business or not, the very first question I ask is, why are you, if you're an entrepreneur, you must be incredibly naive or incredibly crazy, which one is it? And it's like, why are you doing this? And the answer is very telling, I think. Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they say, because I want to make money. Sometimes they say, I have a chip on my shoulder. Sometimes they say, I want to make the planet spin the other way. I mean, there's many different answers. And I'm not judging what the answer is. I really listen carefully to what drives, the cause, because starting a business and running a business is extremely difficult. And it's a big part of people's life. And it's like, if they don't have a strong why, then it just doesn't work. Just fail.
Yeah, I mean, Simon Sinek, his famous TED Talk, begin with why.
Yeah.
And he uses Apple as an example of that.
That's right.
In your, not only in your work with Apple, because you left Apple some time ago, but in your work as a VC and your work with the boards that you've been on, how difficult have you found it to keep people connected to that why?
I think the strongest the why, the easiest it is to keep connected, because you start to attract other people that really share the belief and the why. And it's kind of a self-serving prophecies, if you will. And, at Apple, people were all passionate people, passionate about the product, passionate about, connecting to the emotions of our customers and so on and so forth. And so those, once you have at the beginning of a team, then you attract similar people and it makes it stronger. It's almost like a religion, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I think for the companies who don't have a clear why or a mission or a soul, then it's very hard for them to grow it and to preserve it, because it's just not there. So they have to find other artificial ways to make people happy and keep people on board, and that's much, much harder.
Much harder. In my experience as a consultant and a coach, oftentimes the default is move towards external motivating dynamics, external motivators, rather than an internal inspiration.
That's right.
That will move people. As a company grows now, I do a lot of work with startups, with mid-sized companies, in particular entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. They have pretty visible the soul, the mission of the business is there. But there seems to be an inflection point where, and I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but there's a point where all of a sudden, it stops being a business. It stops being a mission with a business as a delivery mechanism, and it starts to become a business with a mission as an afterthought.
Right. Yeah. I would venture to guess that number is between 1 and 200 people, somewhere like that, based on my experience as well. I invested in a company not too long ago, and they start every single meeting by reciting their mission statement, which is like just 2 lines, very, very straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
And so they really reinforce that. And if you go to their office, the mission statement is written everywhere, because they have a very strong cause. And I think that helps people remind them why they are here and why it matters and what we do as a company matters. But I always tell CEOs, you have to over communicate, and when you say something to an employee, you have to repeat it like 10 to 15 times. And I know it's very frustrating, because you're like, well, I already told the guy a week ago, why do I need to repeat? The truth of the matter is that you have to repeat over and over again. And I think the mission and the why is the similar thing. So at the beginning, it's easy because everybody's in the same room, everybody works together all the time. But as the company grows, as you have different cultures, different offices, different geographies, then it becomes much harder. But you have to really reinforce that all the time, and otherwise it dilutes it and eventually lose it. And then you're right, it becomes a business that happens to have a mission.
Yeah, I spent about 12 years as an external consultant to Nokia when they were actually beginning to come into their own. And this begins back in the late 1990s. And the telephony division was actually relatively small. It was, when I started working with them, they still
Right.
had a tire business. They still had
Right.
a cable business. They were selling rubber boots and farm
Yeah.
implements. I mean, they were a, a very interesting organization. They had, oh, by the way, this little telephony division
Right.
that had developed the GSM standard. As they started growing, and this is, that demarcation point. Early on, every single meeting I was in, and I cannot think of an exception to this, every single meeting I was in with any of their senior people, and actually with any of their people, began with a referencing of their 4 core values. They would bring those onto the table, and these are our 4 values. And so now let's go on with our meeting and run whatever the agenda is through these values if there was a decision to be made. There was a point in the early 2000s, they had, I think, by that time they had merged, the Siemens acquisition had occurred, and so things started, to your point, getting diluted here. They stopped having those conversations.
Right.
Then it became, let's make a business decision, and the hell with anything else. I know there's a question embedded here, and Jorma Olala and Matti Alahuta. Matti ran their networking side, and Jorma was the CEO. Jorma Olala was and these are the 2 guys that, and then started on had the mobile phone side. But they were insistent on these values. When Jorma left the CEO position and moved into the chairman, the operational oversight shifted. And as a consequence of that, I really do think the baby got tossed out with the bath water. How does that get reclaimed, if it can be reclaimed? And I know that it can, because Nokia is about 160 years old. It's reinvented itself I don't know how many times. It's like this, the phoenix that keeps rising. How, in your experience as an entrepreneur, as a VC, how do you reconnect with that?
Well, I think, it's a top-down process. It has to come from the new leadership who says, values and missions and goals and raison d'etre are really important, and I'm going to start there. And it can be changed, by the way, over time. That's okay, as long as there is one, as long as there is one why and one mission. But I think the only way to reclaim it is to have the CEO and the top management team and the board behind. When Steve, I would say we lost our mission when Michael Spindler was CEO and then Guy D'Amelio. When Steve came back, he came back to some very basic core value about customer first and experience. And it was pretty easy to go back there because the DNA of the original Apple still was there in the organization. So we kind of resuscitated it, but it was there. But short of doing that, I don't know, and I don't think you can bring it back. It has to come from the top leadership, and it has to also be not too far from the original one. It could be different, but you don't want to completely change it because you're basically re-engineering the DNA, and that's very, very hard.
Very hard to do, yeah. Because we're basically talking about culture at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm going to go into aligning the dots, if we can, your book. On your website, Blue Dots plural, bluedotspartners.com. One of the things here, and this is the area that says the point of view, traditional responses to low revenue growth aren't effective. That's an interesting declaration. Common tactics may treat symptoms but ignore the disease. That's because they are based on emotions and intuition rather than data. That kind of flies in the face of the entrepreneur having, the gut feel for something, the intuitive move to do this or to do that. How did you come to that conclusion?
Yeah, it's actually not a contradiction, because when the company starts at the beginning, there really isn't any data to measure anyway. It's like you don't
Mhm.
have, thousands of customers and transactions and revenue and gross margin and all that. So at the beginning, intuition is the only way to really drive the business.
Okay.
Once you reach 10 million, which is kind of my inflection point, then you need to change the way you do business. You cannot grow from 10 to 100 million without re-engineering most of the organization and the processes and the tools and everything, the entire stack. That's when emotion has to be replaced by data and analytics and objective measurements. And if you don't do that and you keep operating under emotions and suspicions and ideas, you may get lucky and be successful, but overall it's really, really hard, because then you always have the argument is, well, why should we paint the product in blue? And the CEO says, because I say so, because blue is cool. Well, if I come back and say, well, you know what, 72.3% of your customers really want it green, then, it doesn't matter what you like. If you like blue as a CEO, go on and do it blue, but this is not the right thing to do. And so there has to be a shift from intuition and to rationalize the decision making, and that has to be done and based on data and analytics.
Yeah, the
That's
analytics.
what I meant. That's what we mean on our website.
But yeah, I'm familiar with, I think the fact that Steve did not like to use focus groups
That's right.
to inform product decisions, that sort of thing. Is there he relied on his intuition, and would be my
100%.
inference from that.
But that's very true, yeah. But, Steve was an exceptional entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a lot of CEOs says, well, I want to do it the same way as Steve. And I always saying, Steve is Steve, you're not Steve, you never were and you never will. So, forget about Steve. I mean, you cannot be like him. There's only one.
Yeah.
And arguably, Elon Musk and some others maybe. But I think Steve made a decision purely on intuition, but it's an intuition informed by decades of experience. It's not out of the blue. It's not like he's waking up in the morning, and he was talking to a lot of people. He was asking for a lot of opinions, and he was ingesting this data input, and then he would say, okay, this is the decision I made. But he wasn't just completely irrational. And by the way, many, many times he was willing to change his point of view, even though he would never admit he changed it, but it did. And that's because he was starting to absorb and listen to people and realize that maybe, they were right. Maybe the way he was looking at it. So I wouldn't say he was not shooting from his hip. I wouldn't say he was purely emotional. I'd say he was based on the analysis of all kinds of data points coming into him, and then he would make.
Okay.
But he wasn't irrational and he wasn't emotional.
Yeah, it sounded, the way you describe it, it sounds like he was running a one-man focus group without a formal structure.
And he would challenge people. So if you say, well, we need to put the product in blue, it's like, well, why in the hell should we have blue? Tell me why. And so if he would see that people had a strong opinion that they could clearly defend, he would listen to them. If the guy or the person wasn't able to really articulate why blue was the color, then he was actually would dismiss it.
Success as a lousy teacher. I actually marked this out in the book.
Yeah, that is true. That's Bill Gates.
Success as a lousy teacher seduces smart people into thinking that they can't lose. Now that came from Steve's major competitor at the time, Bill Gates.
Yeah.
But the success trap is a fascinating phenomena. I think it was Marshall Goldsmith that said, what got me here won't get me there.
That's true.
You use data, particularly blue dots. I mean, aligning the dots here. Your firm uses data in a very, I think, unique way to bump revenue into some very interesting places that are unexpected, just because of the ways that you actually parse and use data. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So before I just have a comment based on the success. Steve Jobs, people forget he started Next, and Next was a failure. It didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, he was Steve Jobs, but he made some mistakes as well, and it always doesn't work the way he thought it would work.
The nature of life is evidenced in nature. Nature grows, and all of nature honors the desire to be more, to have more, and to do more. Life thrives when it's allowed to grow. And ideally, thriving is what we also, all of us, want to be able to do. Unfortunately, at some stage in life, most people find themselves settling into what I can only call a rut. And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with the ends kicked out. You want to quickly get out of any rut that you find yourself in. When you stop growing, that's when the coffin starts to appear. The simple truth is this, and this is true for everything in nature. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Every one of us dies. So the question we need to come to grips with is not, are we going to die? The question nature asks us to answer is, are we truly living? That's what motivation is about. It's the desire to move. It's the desire to grow and to excel. Have I lived? How have I lived? I'd love for you to take advantage of my Leadership Mindset Masterclass. It's all about providing you with the tools to ensure thriving for yourself and for those around you. Register today to receive the free introduction video and find out more about this acclaimed program. You'll also receive a copy of my international #1 bestseller, Compassionate Capitalism, A Journey to the Soul of Business. I'm Blaine Bartlett, and I look forward to helping you thrive.
Now, back to your question about data, I think that, one of the things that being on 23 boards, as you mentioned, and the problem is that many, many times in board meetings, we would ask the CEO, well, why are you not growing faster? Why is the market growing faster than us? Why are we losing market share? Where is our competition growing at 20%? We're growing at 12%. And the answer was never satisfying to me. And he was like, well, the VP of sales would come and then he says, well, I missed the numbers because the leads are crap. Marketing is not giving right leads. And this comes and he says, well, we don't have the right product. The product that comes and says, well, you didn't give me the budget. I wanted to do that feature, which I loved, and couldn't do it. And it was a circular conversation where you still don't understand why fundamentally the company is not growing. So as a physicist by training, I said, there's got to be a better way. And I want to be able to measure and use data and analytics. And the big insight that I had a few years ago was that I realized that the growth rate of a company can only be optimized when the company and its target market are perfectly aligned. It's the misalignment between the company and the target market that makes the company slow down. Exactly the same way as if you misalign a gear in a mechanical watch, it will start slowing down and eventually stop. And so that was really a big insight, is that there's no other way to grow fast than aligning better the company with its target market, which, by the way, is forcing the management team to define the target market, which is another subject. But then it's like, okay, well, what does it mean? And then I realized there are 4 independent and universal axes of alignment between any business and its target market. And it's true regardless of what the business does. And that was another big insight. And then we started to put our data hat on it and say, well, can I measure those coefficients of alignment between 0 and 100% along each of those 4 axes? And we found a way to do that. We developed tools and IP. And then now the data reveals exactly what the company is misaligned. And then we can put together what we call the growth playbook, which is basically how you're going to rectify those misalignments and what do you do. And it's like an operating plan. So it's a very detailed plan that we give the CEO, and then on Monday morning at 8 o'clock, he or she knows what to do to start fixing those misalignments and grow faster and generate more shareholder. That's kind of the way we do it at a very, very high level.
So 4 coefficients that you actually align around
yes,
is a metric. Yeah. So in just very briefly, can you elucidate what those 4 are?
So the first alignment is between the pain that the customer has and the claim that the business makes to address that pain. right? So if
So
you have a
pain point.
headache,
Yeah.
Blaine, and I give you a stomachache pill where your pain and my claim are not aligned, you will never buy my pill.
Yep.
The second one is the way the claim is expressed and the way it's understood by the prospect. Those two things have to be aligned. So if I have a pill for your headache, it costs 99 cents. It'll be gone in 10 minutes. But let's say I describe it to you in Korean. I'm assuming you don't speak Korean. Then you will never buy the pill, even though it's the perfect product for you. Because it's like, what the heck is this guy talking?
Yeah.
That's the second axis of alignment. The third one is the way customers want to buy and the way the product is sold in the marketplace have to be aligned. So if I say I have the right pill, but you have to fly to the Bay Area to get it, you're going to say, oh, wait a minute, there's a Walgreens or pharmacy just by where I live. Why can't I just walk and buy it over there? And then the fourth axis of alignment, which is my favorite one because I did steal it out of the Apple playbook, is that working for Steve, I realized I learned many, many really insightful lessons. And one of them was that I realized that there is one and only one business on this entire planet. I realized that everyone is in the exact same business. There is no thousands of businesses or millions, there's only one. And that unique business is the manufacturing and delivery of delight. And at the end of the day, that's what McDonald's is, that's what Bank of America is, that's what your business is, that's what Blue Dots is. We are here to deliver delight to our customers. And the question is, well, how much delight? And the answer is whatever they expect. So you have to set the expectation and you have to beat that expectation by it. So the fourth axis of alignment is the alignment between the expected delight and what the company actually delivers to them. So imagine I now give you the right pill, you take it, and after a while you feel dizzy and your headache is still there and you feel worse. Well, clearly that's not what you expected. What you expected is I take the pill and then 10, 20 minutes after I feel better and I can go on with my daily life. And that's the fourth axis of alignment. So again, they are absolutely universal, regardless of the business, what it does, where it is, the business model, the types of product they sell, the distribution, doesn't matter. They have to align along those four axes, which is the pain and the claim, the message and the perception, purchase versus sale, and then expected delight and what's delivered. And I argue pretty strongly that if you align your business along those four axes, you will realize the maximum growth rate within your target market.
Philippe, I love elegance.
It's very simple, but it took me 30 years to figure this out.
This is probably one of the most elegant business models I've ever heard. Truly, I've got chills as you describe this.
If you want to be complete, just to paint the entire picture, there is a fifth axis of alignment. So I really call them 4+1, and the fifth axis of alignment is the internal alignment. It's very clear that if the company is not internally aligned, back to the discussion we had earlier on the mission and the why and how we want to serve our customers. If there is no internal alignment, then the execution of the four market-facing alignments that I described will not be successful and the company is not going to grow. In fact, the last chapter of the book is dedicated to that internal alignment, but there's many, many other books that have been written on this, so I didn't feel the need of just adding.
Again, I've got chills as I listen to you describe this. And people have heard me that have listened to this show. They've heard me say this. When I was working with Nokia, is when the first Apple phone came out, when the iPhone came out.
Right.
Yeah, and I have still got the box that first iPhone came in. It was so elegantly packaged. It was. Yes. I mean, so you talk about delight. It was, and I was delighted when I opened it up too. But
by the way, you made a mistake. You should have never opened it up. And if you had not touched the shrink wrap, you could have sold it for, I think, $80,000 or $90,000. It went like a few months ago. I forgot the exact number.
Oh wow! I didn't make.
So the lesson is when you buy an Apple product, don't touch it. Keep it for 20 or 30 years, and then it's worth like $500,000.
Buy two of them, one to use
and
one.
Buy two. Exactly. You open one and you keep the other.
That's so good. Well, as far as I can tell, the purpose of business is to enhance the probability of thriving on the planet for anybody that comes into contact with the service or product. And if people feel that they get a chance to thrive because they have access to this, they're going to beat a path to my door. I mean, I will never have to worry about revenue.
Yeah, let me gently push back against
Yeah,
that.
please.
Because when I go to McDonald's to eat a 99-cent meal, it's not about thriving, right? It's about, but what is my expectation? So I always said, if you go to a 3-star Michelin restaurant in Paris, I can argue fairly easily that it's the same product as McDonald's. At the end of the day, you're putting food in your stomach.
Mhm.
There is really, once you leave the place, you put food in your stomach. But of course, the expected delight is very different. So I don't think people go to McDonald's to thrive. I think they go to McDonald's because they can have a very convenient meal at a very low cost.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not sure what McDonald's mission is, but to me, that's the expectation that they set. And they have a very profitable and very nice business. There's nothing wrong with it. So I think there's many missions and many ways to have people thrive. But again, it's like, it's always goes back to what expectation did you set, and then are you over delivering slightly? Not too much, because you will leave money on the table, and that's it.
Yeah, and for me, that begins to, it's the operational definition of thriving, and it is yeah.
In that case, you're right.
Delight being the experience of the promise being delivered on.
Yeah. Okay, and you're right. That's correct.
Yeah. So, but that point of clarification, I think, is really valuable. Because if McDonald's can do it and a Michelin restaurant can do it, serving the same food, it's not obviously prepared or presented in the same way.
Yeah, and
but
it's food in your
food. Yeah,
right.
And this goes to your first point here, where know the market.
Yeah, and McDonald's, you go there to eat, and you go to a 3-star Michelin restaurant for the experience. For the memories, very, very different, even though it's the same product.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've been to a number of Michelin restaurants where it was just kind of, I get to just sit and, one of my business partners owned a Michelin restaurant. And
oh, really? That's cool.
Oh, yeah. And I loved it. I really did not like the day he sold that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a great wine cellar. It was wonderful.
That's what
So, where can people find out more about aligning the dots and what it is that and the company's up to?
The easiest way is they can find a book on Amazon under Aligning the Dots. And if they want to connect with me, the best way is to connect via LinkedIn. And they can refer to the podcast and they say, hey, I listened to this podcast and I hate it. I need to talk to you about it or something like that. Well, connect with me on LinkedIn. That's really the best way to do it.
Okay.
And they can also email me at phd@bluedotspartners.com, and that's my email address.
Okay.
Which is on the web.
We'll put all that in the show notes, for sure, so people will have access to it. Folks who've been listening to Philippe Bouissou, aligning the dots, the company is Blue Dots Partners, and I encourage you to pick up the book. I mean, this last corner of the show, I think, was worth the price of admission, definitely, and not that the whole thing wasn't, but the 4+1 that Philippe speaks to, I think, is truly it's one of the most elegant business plans I've ever heard in my life. It just absolutely will transform the way you run your business if you pay attention to these. And Philippe and his company, if you need help with it, you know where to go. Yeah, he will be your guide in the dark, so to speak. And let's see here. I don't think I've got anything else to add to that except just to say thank you. And
thank you, man. It was a real pleasure.
It was all mine, definitely. But thank you for being a part of this. And folks, as always, find ways in your life to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. You'll find your life works a whole lot better when you're making distributions rather than trying to find ways to accumulate things.
So true.
Take care.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks again.
Thank you.